Okay, so in this video we're going to introduce this idea of the quadratic formula and how we apply it. So you want to make sure that you get this theorem or this formula down in your notes, because this is something that you're going to be needing to know. You're going to have this formula memorized. By the way, when you read this, when you memorize this, you don't want to memorize it as negative b. You want to memorize it as the opposite of b. Simple linguistic thing, but it'll help hopefully avoid make some common mistakes. But it's always the opposite of b. This is a plus or minus symbol. We'll talk about that when we look at an example, but it's plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. And it's the whole thing. All of this that we just said, the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all of that divided by 2 times a. Now it's important to understand why we're talking about, why we need to use this quadratic formula. Because I don't think when I was in high school that I fully understood what I was doing. I just knew to use this formula every once in a while. But we use this when it's in standard form. We use it to solve an equation when the equation is set equal to 0. We get that up here, but you want to make sure that you understand that it has to be equal to 0. If it's not equal to 0, we can't use the quadratic formula until we get it equal to 0. Essentially what we're finding is we're finding out whether or not the parabola has x-intercepts and what those x-intercepts are. Because you look over here at this diagram shows a parabola with 2 x-intercepts. Well, the quadratic formula, by doing the quadratic formula, it'll give us both of those answers. That's what the plus and minus does. And like I said, we'll talk about that here in a minute. Okay, let's look at some examples then. Again, you have to have that formula memorized. It's the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. An easy way to memorize it is every single time you go to use it, write it down. It'll help your brain make the connection between the formula itself and when you use it, so it'll make it easier to recall later on. And again, the first thing I look to see, is it equal to 0? It is. So now I can go ahead and work on solving this. So to solve this, the first thing we're going to do is, like it says, we're going to find the values of a, b, and c. A is 2, b is negative 7, c is negative 49. Now we've done this before when we were solving equations and putting them in standard form. Remember, I had you write down what a, b, and c are. The whole purpose of doing that is to get you familiar with finding these numbers, to make it that much easier than when we're using the quadratic formula. Because now if I just look at these numbers, I don't have to get confused by looking at the equation. So when I think about my formula as being the opposite of b, well, b is already a negative 7, so the opposite of that is a positive 7. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. Now I want you to do it exactly like this. Right now, we have to square the b. Well, in order to square the b, I'm going to take this negative 7. When I square it, it becomes a positive 49. I don't want you to write down negative 7 squared. Okay, when people do that, they make mistakes when they plug it in their calculator. So I want you to, and I'll always give you values for b that are easy to square without a calculator. So please don't use your calculator to square this. It just means that negative 7 squared is negative 7 times negative 7, which is a positive 49. Then it's minus 4 times a is 2, and c is a negative 49. This whole thing is going to be divided by 2 times a. And this also you can simplify, because 2 times a, well, a is 2 as well, so 2 times 2 is 4. And now we're going to simplify this. Now, again, do this exactly as I'm doing in this video. We don't want to plug this in our calculator as far as the whole thing. We're going to take this piece by piece. So the 7 plus or minus, I'm going to leave that alone for right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to simplify what's under the radical, because that radical is like a grouping symbol. So I'm going to do inside of that first when I go to simplify this. So when I take on my calculator 49 minus 4 times 2 times negative 49, when I type that in my calculator, I get 441 as my answer. So now the next step is to simplify the square root part. So I'm going to take the square root of 441, which when you do that, you get 21. So now I have x equals 7 plus or minus 21 divided by 4. Now here's where that plus or minus comes in, because I'm going to have two possible scenarios. One where I take x equals 7 plus 21 divided by 4. And the other one where it's going to be, let me move this up more. And the other one where it's going to be x equals 7 minus 21 divided by 4. Now a note about this. Please do not type this in on your calculator as 7 plus 21 divided by 4. You will get the wrong answer because order of operations would tell you to do this part first if you typed it in like that. Well, the problem is we don't want that to go first. We want the 7 plus 21 to go first. So since this is contrary to order of operations, you need to put it in parentheses, or again, do it in your head, or just take 7 plus 21 if it's numbers that you can't add in your head. Type that in your calculator first, and then hit the divide button, hit enter. I'm sorry, 7 plus 21, hit enter, then hit the divide button, and then divide by 4. So for this one, 7 plus 21 is 28. 28 divided by 4 gives me 7. 7 minus 21 is negative 14. Divide that by 4, I get negative 3.5. So my answers for x are 7 and negative 3.5. Now, this is a process, okay? So I know some people look at this and they say, oh my gosh, there's no way I could do all this. It's just a whole bunch of baby steps. Just take it one step at a time and you'll get through it. So what I'm going to do for this next problem is I'm going to help you get it started, and then I want you to take it from there. So for this one, let's first start by identifying what our A, B, and C are. So for this one, A is 6, B is 12, C is negative 18. So now I'm going to put this into my quadratic formula. So it's going to be the opposite of B. So negative 12 plus or minus a square root. Remember, 12 squared, we can do that in our head. B squared is 12. So 12 squared is 144. Minus 4 times A is 6. C is negative 18. And it's the whole thing divided by 2A. 2 times 6 is 12. Now I want you guys to pause the video, and I want you guys to take it from here. See if you can't simplify it. So then why don't you guys do that and then hit play when you're ready to check your answer. Okay, so let's see if you got this as your answer. So looking at the work that I did here, you can see that when you simplify under the radical, that's the next step in blue here. 144 minus 4 times 6 times negative 18 gives you 576. The square root of that is 24, so now I have negative 12 plus or minus 24, all divided by 12. Well, negative 12 plus 24 is 12. Take that, divide by 12, I get 1. Negative 12 minus 24 is negative 36. Divide that by 12, you get negative 3. So those are two solutions for x. Okay, now let's look at this next one. So this next one, we're going to start by, again, I forgot to do this in the last one, but you always want to look to see if it's equal to 0. It's not. So for this one, we'd start this out by getting it equal to 0 by subtracting 8 from both sides. So now I have 4x squared minus 2x minus 20 equals 0. So that's crucial, because if we hadn't done that first step, we'd get the answer wrong because we'd be using a value of c, which is negative 12, which you can see now is not the correct value we should be using. So again, for this one, your A would be 4, your B would be negative 2, and your C would be negative 20. So let's go ahead and walk through this one again together. So it's going to be the opposite of B, so opposite of negative 2 is a positive 2. So it's going to be x equals a positive 2 plus or minus a square root of b squared. So negative 2, when you square that, becomes a positive 4. Minus 4 times a. A is 4 again. That's okay if there's a bunch of 4's here. That's no big deal. And c is a negative 20. This whole thing is divided by 2a. Well, a is 4, so 2 times 4 is 8. So now when I go to solve this, I'd get 2 plus or minus minus 4 times negative 20. Notice it's not 4 minus 4, so don't write down 0. We have to do this using order of operations, or like I said, using our calculator. And the calculator will do the order of operations for you. And it'll get 324 under the radical divided by 8. Well, that means that x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 324 is 18. So when you do that, 2 plus 18 is 20. 20 divided by 8 will be a decimal. That's going to be 2.5. 2 minus 18 is negative 16. Negative 16 divided by 8 is negative 2. So there's your answer for C. Now I want you to try this last one all on your own. I want you to recognize that it's not equal to 0. So I want you guys to go ahead and solve this. So get it started by adding or getting 0 on the right side of the equal sign. And then go ahead and solve the rest of the equation. And so pause the video and hit play when you're ready to check your answer. Okay, so let's go ahead and check. You should have gotten 1.2 and negative 3 as your answer. Again, you want to get the equation set up to be equal to 0, so we'd add 11 to both sides. So I get 5x squared plus 9x minus 18 equals 0. Giving me my values for a, b, and c are 5, 9, and negative 18. So now the opposite of b, so the opposite of 9 is a negative 9, plus or minus b squared. 9 squared is 81. Minus 4 times a times c, so minus 4 times 5 times negative 18. All divided by 2a, 2 times 5 is 10. Simplify what's under the radical. 81 minus 4 times 5 times negative 18 gives me 441. The square root of 441 is 21, so negative 9 plus 21 is negative 9 plus 21 is going to be 12. And 12 divided by 10 is 1.2. Negative 9 minus 21 is negative 30. Negative 30 divided by 10 is negative 3. So, hopefully you have a good idea now of how to use the quadratic formula to solve an equation. Let's look at one last type of problem. This is where they give us the quadratic formula all set up, but we need to figure out what equation they're solving. Now, it might seem like this is going to be a complicated mess, but it's really rather simple. Your first step is to figure out what your values of a, b, and c are. Well, to find a, remember it's in the form 4 times a times c. So a is negative 7. B, remember out front here, this is the opposite of b. So negative 2 is the opposite of what b is. That means b is a positive 2. C, remember again, back inside of the radical here, we have 4 times a times c. C would be 5. We're going to put this into standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c. So that tells me that my answer for this, the equation that they're solving, is this one. That's y equals negative 7x squared, and then it'd be plus b, so plus 2x plus c, which would be 5. There's your equation. Again, the reason why it's a negative 7x squared is we get the values from negative 7 for a. B is 2, so it's going to be 2 times x, and c is 5, so just be plus 5. Why don't you guys go ahead and try it for this problem now, so pause the video and hit play when you're ready to check your answer. Okay, with this one, you should have gotten that your value for a is a positive 10. You get that from right here. Here's your a. Your b, well, it's the opposite. 8 is, this is the opposite of what's happening to b, so b is a negative 8, and c would be a negative 3. So my equation would be y equals a, so 10x squared, plus b, b is a negative 8, so I'm going to write it as minus 8x, plus c, so it's plus negative 3, which I'm going to write as minus 3. So there's your answer. You should always be able to go backwards too and make sure that you get each of these pieces. So in other words, b is negative 8, so the opposite of that would be a positive 8. A is 10, so we have that here. C is negative 3, so we have that there. So everything all matches up, so it looks good. So that would be your answer. Y equals 10x squared minus 8x minus 3. So hopefully after watching this video, you have a better idea of what the quadratic formula is all about and how to take an equation, make sure that it's equal to 0, and then apply that quadratic formula. Or in situations like this, when they give you the quadratic formula all set up, you can be able to figure out what equation they're solving. So with that, good luck on your assignment.